welcome to the Student Sparks podcast, where naturopathy meets neuroscience. I'm Parker Malev, the naturopath.
And I'm Emma Johnson, the neuroscientist. Join us on this adventure as we delve into the depths of nutrition, nature, medicine, and the mind,
where every insight sparks discussion and debate. Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of the Student Sparks podcast. Today's episode is entirely based around why alternative medicine is more important than it gets credit for, especially today. There seems to be some growing popularity in the areas of integrative medicine or naturopathic medicine or even herbalism, but it's still hard to deny that it's kind of unpopular, especially in comparison to the conventional healthcare system, especially in America. Before we start today, I just want to emphasize the fact that perspectives are crucial, and not just your perspective, but all perspectives. It's impossible to incorporate all perspectives that are in existence into your own, but they're still crucial to try to get as many as possible, because an opinion isn't made true just by what the most popular view is. Public opinion does not determine truth. It can ascribe some value to something and whether or not it is accepted by the public, but it does not determine whether or not it is actually true. So, just because conventional healthcare is the most popular form of healthcare does not make alternative medicine any less important, just because it's not as popular or well accepted. Now, today, we're going to be going into some arguments for and some arguments against alternative medicine, and I'm going to be debunking both. Or not debunking per se, but kind of just laying out some of the facts, some of the perspectives that people have on these things, and why they may be a little bit misguided on both sides. One of the most important things that I want to lay out to you right now is that I am not fighting for either side, whether it be alternative or contemporary medicine. Even though I am striving to be a naturopathic physician, I do think that there is merit to both. I think there are pitfalls in both. I don't think that one side... Actually, I do think that one side is better than the other, but I'm not taking a side completely. I'm not labeling myself entirely. So just have that in mind while you're listening to my arguments today, and I hope that they will come through clearly. So first things first, let's lay down some ground rules or definitions for this discussion. So this is all centered around healthcare and medicine, so let's just look at what medicine is defined as. It is anything that is defined as the treatment of an illness or injury or the study of how an illness and an injury is treated. This includes illness, injury, and occasionally prevention. Some definitions in online dictionaries do include prevention, but most of them did not. Now, I do believe that medicine includes prevention personally, but the pure term of medicine itself is a treatment of sickness, of a lack of well-being. So since this statement is pretty open, it's a vague statement. It's just anything that treats an illness or injury. This would even qualify a Google search for any kind of health-related information, medicine. Everything that we do that helps us regain our health or to build up our health picture is medicine. So this is the first point of how, even though a lot of people don't see things like nutrition or exercise as medicine themselves, they are. And alternative medicine encompasses a lot of that. It's just the mindset of alternative medicine is keeping yourself in a state of well-being. And that's something that I think conventional care misses. So now, looking at perspectives and definitions together, let's see how a medical doctor and a naturopathic doctor would define alternative medicine, because both of these views are very important, because they're both, if they're properly licensed on the ND side of things, then they're both licensed physicians, just in a different application of such. So an MD, and this is from Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic describes alternative medicine as healthcare practices that traditionally haven't been a part of conventional medicine. So this is essentially anything that you can't get from a normal doctor's office. As for the naturopaths, the Association of Accredited Naturopathic Medical Colleges defines alternative medicine as anything that prioritizes the most natural, least invasive, and least toxic therapies to treat illness and to promote wellness by viewing the body as an integrated whole. So these two definitions are pretty different. These definitions clearly demonstrate that perspective is essential when creating such definitions. You can't let perceptions keep you from understanding the actual value of something. For example, if you are visiting a doctor, you will not necessarily get nutrition advice. You will be advised to lose weight, or lower your blood pressure, or consume less salt, but you won't really get a detailed description of how to do that. So there's a really fine line of when is something like that considered alternative medicine? Is exercising considered alternative medicine because you don't get any guidance on how to exercise from a doctor's office? The real problem here is that who you listen to on the value of something, who you get your information from, usually determines your value of something. And that's not really fair to either side, especially when there is merit to something, even if you don't know it yet. Before I go into more detail about any of this, I do just want to lay out that I am choosing to go into naturopathic medicine, meaning that it's impossible for me to not be biased. But, that being said, I am laying out reasons on both sides of why people don't like alternative medicine and why they do, and I'm running through each of them and kind of giving a better description of why these are good reasons or why they're bad reasons on both sides. So bear with me, and please recognize that although I value science overall, I am open to all other possibilities, and I don't really like confining what can be possible to only what has been studied. And by that I mean studies don't define something's validity, it only confirms it. So after all that talk about definitions, I'm going to give you my definition of what alternative medicine is. I describe it as an all-encompassing field of health that emphasizes wellness and quality of life above all else. It's a pretty vague concept due to its individualistic nature that aims to never blanket treat anyone. So it does an excellent job of combining mechanisms of the body, the mind, and the spirit into one single treatment plan for that one single person. What works for one person won't work for another person in the same situation. It might, but you can't confirm that it will just because it worked with somebody who's similar. Additionally, it usually includes subcategories of naturopathy, homeopathy, acupuncture, chiropractic, things like yoga or mind-body practices, herbalism, and a bunch more. There's a lot of different therapies and such that are included in alternative medicine, but those are the major ones that everyone knows. Nutrition, however, is a bit of a controversial topic, but I would definitely consider it alternative medicine because it's kind of hard to get it at a conventional hospital in the US. You have to kind of dig for it and ask a bunch of questions and follow-up questions to get some advice on nutrition. Alright, so let's get into it. In my observation, there are 6 major reasons that people are starting to gravitate towards alt-med. Now, I have my thoughts about each one, but for the sake of it right now, I'm going to lay all 6 out, and then we will go into a little bit of depth and describe each one. Number 1 is that everyone can practice. It's super readily available, it's really easy to access, it does cost money, but it's fully like you are able to practice it. You don't need a prescription to practice it. Number 2, it emphasizes natural support over suppression. Number 3, people like the lack of side effects and the natural aspect of the treatments. Number 4, it's been around since ancient times. Number 5, patient is king. Education is super important, and the patient is not defined by their disease. And number 6 And what I think is the most important, or not most important, but the most common one that people will give you when they're asked why they like alternative medicine is because they say that their practitioners look for the root cause, the underlying cause of their disease. So these are some pretty great reasons, but a few of them definitely need a little bit further description and, a little bit of a, hey, this is good, but this isn't kind of thing. So let's look at number one. Anyone can practice it. This is great for giving people control over their health. It gives them the ability to look things up, decide they want to do it, and then go do it. They don't need a prescription. They can get guidance from a practitioner or a physician of some kind, but they don't need it. It's not necessary. It's helpful, but not required. It also encourages that people get a better understanding of their body so they know what products might work for them. So for number two is support over suppression. Support over suppression is something that I will almost never compromise on. And this concept embodies allowing your body to do what it is supposed to and supporting that natural process instead of crushing it so that everything goes away and everything dies. So there might be some necessity in areas such as with cancer where you kind of need to get rid of it or you'll die. That's still being researched, of course. There are some alternative therapies for cancer, but even those, they're a little bit iffy. But so is chemotherapy, so I don't know. That one's up in the air. But in the case of less intense issues, I think that the body is smarter than what we give it credit for. And there's a lot of cases where we think the body is making a mistake, but it's not. And we try to, suppress, get rid of it. And then you're destroying a process that's there to help you in the first place. Pain is uncomfortable, but it's necessary for both mental reasons and physical reasons. Acute inflammation is there for a reason. So, for example, if you get a fever, your first instinct is to go grab that aspirin and grab an ice pack and get rid of it as quickly as you can so that you're not sick anymore. You get rid of it. A fever is an immune response that's happening to create an environment that pathogens are not able to live in. If you suppress an immune response like that, the pathogen will likely remain there, and you might lessen your symptoms of sickness in that moment. Like, you're going to get rid of the fever, you might feel a little bit better, your temperature will go down, but you will likely have a lot longer term where you're experiencing other symptoms, like in the case of a fever, an illness that includes a fever. Usually that's cold or flu, something in that area, an infection of some kind. That infection can still be there, but since you've killed off the response that's supposed to kill it, then there's nothing left to kill that pathogen. Your body's tried, but you stomped on it. I think there needs to be a bit more of this mindset when you go into things in conventional medicine. Antibiotics are fine in some cases. I think they're very damaging, personally. But I also think they can be necessary when you've got that one bug you just cannot get rid of. But when you go to get that antibiotic, there's no information on how to prepare yourself so that it doesn't harm you as badly. For those of you that don't know, most antibiotics work in such a way where it kills off everything or a large amount of things, both good and bad. And it doesn't specifically target the one strain of bacteria. That's very difficult to do. I'm not saying that we need something that targets a specific bacteria type. That's maybe we have that, maybe we don't, but I think that's really difficult for the context of this situation. You won't get any information on how to prepare yourself so that an antibiotic is less damaging to your system. You also won't get any information on how to recover after you've taken it. It's just, okay, take this round of antibiotics, then after that you should be fine and go back to normal. I don't think that's wise. I think this is one area that is really, really good when it comes to alternative medicine. The idea of support rather than suppression is one of the biggest reasons that I actually chose to go into alternative medicine, alt-med, because I don't like suppressing natural processes in my body. I like understanding how my body works and then making sure that is how it's working, instead of doing things that do the opposite. All right, number 3. A lot of people like alt med because the treatments are more natural and they don't have side effects. Now, this is a slight misconception because anything that's bioactive will have an effect of some kind. A side effect just means that it isn't the intended effect. It's something that comes with the intended effect. Herbal remedies, which is usually what we're talking about when it comes to side effects or not having side effects, they do. They're just not as aggressive. And the difference between a side effect in a conventional pharmaceutical versus a naturally grown herbal substance are in a huge contrast of one another when it comes to side effects. So people like the safety. Actually, a lot of sites that I see, like Harvard and such, kind of say that alternative medicine is dangerous, which is something we'll go into later. It's not dangerous in comparison to a pharmaceutical because the amount of possible side effects for pharmaceuticals is 10 times more than an herbal substance. The only herbal side effect you might have is an allergy. You might be allergic to it. And not anaphylactic allergic, but like, oh, my tummy hurts. I have a headache. Going a little bit further into this, natural compounds are present within a complex of molecules. Oftentimes, a pharmaceutical is one substance, and that's it. It's a specific compound or molecule that is created or put into, isolated to target one specific thing. It's going after this one thing, and that's all it's doing. Whereas a natural substance, like, let's take for example vitamin B. Vitamin B is great. We kind of need it. It's kind of essential. But if you're taking vitamin B by itself, there's a lot of research that suggests that it's not good to take these antioxidant vitamins, like vitamin E, K, D, and whatever, by themselves. Because they all exist in a natural compound in foods. So the only way to actually make them work properly within the body and not create some negative effects is that we have to add them in together with things that the body uses to process and to keep these processes going. So with vitamin B, let's look at B12. In order for B12 to be absorbed and processed properly within the body, you also need folate, because without folate, the biological processes can't be completed. So that's why a lot of people suggest that you take a vitamin B complex instead of just folate or just vitamin B or folic acid. It's not recommended. And the reason for that is because that's how the body receives it, and then it has all the components to complete a certain task. A pharmaceutical drug is designed to do one thing and one thing only, for the most part. Sometimes it has alternate effects that are positive, but it's designed to do one thing. Like how Ozempic was created to lower your A1C, but it ended up causing you to lose weight as well. I'm not saying Ozempic is positive by any means, but the effects that it had did two positive things, even though it was designed to do one. So taking all of that and bringing it back into the realm of herbs, those herbs exist in their natural compound. It has all of these things together, so they're able to do different things in the body. That's why if you look up what a certain herb will do, it will often give you a few things, and some of them are kind of unrelated.
For example, the medicinal plant hawthorn is used traditionally to treat heart conditions like chest pain and just general cardiovascular issues, but it's also used to treat intestinal infections. So these two systems, the heart and the the GI tract, are, in my opinion, interconnected completely, but from the perspective of like this organ and this organ, they're separate organs. They may, interconnect with one another in their function, but they're separate organs. And this herbal remedy is traditionally used in folk medicine to treat both. And this is pretty common. Most herbs will have a huge list of things that they can do, and this is because they're present in a full complex of things. So they might target that one thing a little bit less than the pharmaceutical comparison might, but it's still going to impact it just on a lower scale. There are some herbs that do have some really, really strong reactions to people, or some strong impacts on their systems, but for the most part, they will do many things within the setting of one herb because they're in a complex. The set of antioxidants and polyphenols and the nutrients that they contain, the body's able to utilize in a systematic way that will do more than just one thing, because it's not just a concentrated singular substance. So there is a bit of a misconception that natural remedies don't have side effects. They do. They're just not going to be as strong as a pharmaceutical. Now, if you mix the two, there are a lot of sources like Mayo Clinic and Harvard that say, you can't take this herb if you're going to, like, if you can't take hawthorn if you're on a blood thinner, because what they're saying is that hawthorn does work as a blood pressure medication. It will interact and make your blood pressure too low if you're on a blood thinner. I think that's proof by itself that these herbs do have some impact that are enough to warrant this warning. Moving on to number 4. This argument is one that I have heard quite a lot, and it's people love to say that they like alternative medicine because of how long it's been around and how our ancestors have successfully used it for thousands and thousands of years. And this can be good for a lot of things. This can be useful information to look at the age of something and look at how it's been documented over the years. But I would argue that the age of something isn't really relevant to whether or not it's true. It really just matters how much it's been looked into, and that's how we gather our opinions about it. The age of something doesn't make it true. It can add or subtract value to it based off of what perspective you're looking at it from. Somebody who truly values a cultural item may really, really like that it's old. For example, there's traditional Chinese medicine and there's Ayurvedic medicine. A lot of people on the conventional medicine side of things don't tend to like these kinds of medicines because they err on the side of spirituality with chakras and chi and the flow of energies throughout the body with meridians and such. And that's very far off perspective-wise for a lot of these practitioners. But if you were to ask somebody who is from one of these regions, you realize that this is a culturally significant practice that you'll see it's integrated with their daily practices, their diets, what they eat. I know a lot in Chinese culture, they really value when to have hot meals, when to have cold meals, and it's a big part of Chinese medicine is balancing the yin and the yang. Warm and sour and bitter and all these different flavors, and that also branches into Ayurvedic medicine with the different flavors and the dosha types and such. That perspective is something that a lot of Westerners have a really hard time grasping, and those are some ancient practices. And yet we see validity in things like acupuncture, which is starting to be slowly accepted and integrated into conventional health. So things like that, just because they're old doesn't make them better than something that's new, but it also just doesn't change the actual scientific value. It changes the cultural value and the personal value of it. But just because it's old doesn't mean it's better. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's better. Something new may not be as well developed, as well established kind of thing. So you need to find a balance of it, and you need to find the truth within eat the fish, spit out the bones. And when it comes to real argument of validity behind alternative medicine, you can't bring up the age, because the way that we test things is different. Who you ask about spirituality and these mind-body practices and such, that's all gonna be, they're hard to study because they're so individualistic. And that's a lot of things within alt med, is that they're hard to study because they're individualistic and they're based purely on what this person needs and how they respond to things. So that's hard to do in a controlled trial, because you would need 50 copies of the same exact person with the same exact genetics, just clones. clones without separate brains. So that would be probably why people bring up the age of it into this, because there's a lot of case studies from hundreds of years ago. And that's fine. We've just changed how we view something's value in today's age. Today's age, we value control trials, randomized control trials. And for the sake of what will apply to most people, I think that a combination between using the control trials and using case studies is the best way to go with alt-med specifically, because things are less dangerous. You're able to, trial and error. You're able to add in and subtract and without risk to the patient. And that moves perfectly into the next point, and it's that the patient is king. Number 5 is that the patient is above all else. And this concept is probably one of my favorite reasons why I would love to be an alt-med practitioner, a licensed one. And it's the lack, this sounds funny, but the lack of regulation in this field allows practitioners to sit down for as long as they want with their patient. It averages, 45 minutes to an hour for most naturopathic physicians. You know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that most of you that have gone to a doctor's office has had an experience where you sit 3 times as long in the lobby than you do actually sitting with the doctor having a conversation. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons that a lot of us are dissatisfied with that system. And it's not the doctor's fault by any means. I'm laying that out there. It's usually just what their insurance or what the hospital management will confine them to. So the lack of regulation in this field allows physicians to really put their patient in a position that makes them comfortable enough to talk and tell them everything that they feel and that they want and the things that they would like to become or move towards. This makes it a lot easier to make an individual treatment plan specifically to fit that person and their life. A lot of times, it's hard for people to fit in effective exercise routines or eat well without some kind of guidance. And I think that's really missing in conventional healthcare is the ability to sit down and say, hey, here's how you can do this in your life. Or, hey, I know you have trouble with this, so let's rearrange your plan a little bit. It's kind of hard to do when you're so limited in understanding what your patient's life looks like. And then, of course, this opens up the ability of patients to ask questions. They can actually say, hey, I feel this way. Can we look into this? Or, hey, why are you prescribing this? What does this specific item do? And you can actually explain it. You can have your little visuals prepared and have little teaching materials. The patient is king and education is above all else. And this is really an amazing part of alternative medicine that I think if we integrated that into if conventional medicine was able to do that one thing, I think that would transform the entire system and a lot of people would stop veering away from it or feel dissatisfied with it. As of right now, alternative medicine is the only field that allows for this kind of practice. I mean, I think family physicians are the ones that are probably closest to doing that, but it's still not as common. You're still limited by what your insurance allows you to do. This concept of putting the patient above all else, I think, would be the cure to the problem with mainly women feeling like they're not being listened to at all. And I think if we had more practitioners who understood that there are, you can listen to somebody talk about their life. You can listen to somebody tell you how they feel all the time. You can see a timeline and the cycles, and you can help regulate that person back onto the normal cycle. And unless we keep pushing patients through as fast as possible, unless we slow it down, which I know is impossible in conventional medicine right now, unless we do slow it down, find a way, things will continue like this, for men and women alike. The treatment will get quicker and quicker, and we will continue to stay sick because the education is not there. That's one of my biggest hopes in becoming a practitioner with this opportunity is to mainly listen. Listen as much as I possibly can, and then I will spend the rest of my time making something for that person. And that's what I want. I don't want to be barred by a company who doesn't know my patients and doesn't see what they're going through. Tell me how to treat my patient. I cannot do that. I cannot and will not. I'm hoping that I can find some way to make it accessible and affordable, but that's the give and take there. That's the hard part. Moving on to number 6. This one's pretty important too, and it's the one that I hear the most often from people saying why they like alternative medicine more than conventional. And it's because alt med practitioners look for the root cause of a disease instead of treating just the symptoms. As a concept, this is perfect. This is great. There's gonna be an underlying thing, and if you just treat the symptoms and not the cause, it's just, the cause is still there, but you might feel better, but the cause is still doing damage. But I think that saying root cause is a bit of a fallacy on its own, because nearly all diseases are multifaceted, and every single person responds to stressors in unique ways. Just as a hypothetical example, if you had 2 female students who are stressed out before their final exam, they've both studied for hours, same amount of hours, ate the same food in the school's dining hall, they're both stressed. That's the bottom line. They're both stressed, except one of them gets headaches and one of them gets indigestion. The root cause that most practitioners alt med practitioners would look at would be, oh, you're stressed. Find ways to lower your stress. That's great. That's probably a root cause, but that's not all of them. The reason that you have 2 different responses could be for so many different reasons. Maybe the one with the headaches changed their caffeine intake, and now they're dealing with that and stress. Maybe one of them got a little less sleep. Even more so, the one with indigestion could have a different gut microbiome that reacts differently to stress and is in a different state of health than the other student. So then the stress may be the trigger, but the underlying health conditions and other changes within your lifestyle will also be root causes. So if you have a practitioner who's just looking for that one thing, if you're looking for that one thing and you fix that one thing, it might get a little better, but it's not going to resolve because the other things have not been addressed. The goal should be to fix as many as you can to eliminate triggers and stressors. The changing of the caffeine intake would be a stressor. The getting less hours of sleep because you're staying up studying would be a stressor. The fact that your gut is in disarray, that's a bit of a physiological issue that you have to fix through dieting and maybe some supplementation of some kind. Changes of habits and such, but that's still a root cause. The stress shouldn't cause indigestion. Headaches is a little more normal, but it's a little more common, but I like to say that common doesn't equal normal. Shouldn't be happening, because stress is a natural response, and that stress should go away. Regardless, you have 2 people experiencing the same thing, different outcomes. It's because there's causes. It's not a root cause. There's so many causes that it's easier to treat the whole person than it is to say, oh, you're just stressed. Let's just fix the stress and then you'll be fine. I think that's a promise that's gonna get you nowhere. All right, now I'm sure that there are more points in favor of alternative medicine, and I definitely think there's quite a bit. But since arguments against it are more popular in the general public, I believe that overviewing and refuting these antagonistic points of view is more valuable than just discussing why I think it's good. Again, here we have 6 main points that I have observed in people who do not like alternative medicine. Number 1, it's outdated. This is the same argument as saying, I like it because it's old. It's an appeal to antiquity, which is a logical fallacy that assigns something value based off its age. Age is irrelevant when determining something's... it's not irrelevant, it's a tiny factor in determining something's value. For example, all modern practices are based on ancient concepts of logic and reasoning and language, mathematics, that kind of stuff. All good research is based on the scientific method, which originated from Sir Francis Bacon in the 1600s, the things we learn in early science classes in school. This is just the whole concept of age. Just get that out of your brain, because there's new studies that suggest that certain parts of alt med work, and there's certain parts that suggest that it doesn't. Let's just get rid of the age argument. Let's stop with that. Number 2, the second reason why people don't like alt med is that it just plain does not work.
So all we really need to say for this is that there are case studies and clinical trials that do confirm that certain therapies work. Especially, my favorite is going to be the herbal area of things, because that's easier to prove because they have biological activity that can impact our physiology. I'm sure that there are products that don't work, and there's plenty of products in every area that don't work. For example, there are more than 1,000 drug recalls every year, and that's from Harvard Health reporting. But I've never actually heard anyone say that conventional drugs don't work, so that's, it's a bit of an odd comparison. But still, they have tons of recalls. They both have studies that say that certain things work, and that some don't. So this isn't a good argument either, because saying it doesn't work would include every single possible therapy. Alright, reason number 3. There's too much fraud. Again, this is a little bit of an easy one to point out the flaws in, because there's fraud in everything. In an unregulated field, yeah, of course there's gonna be fraud. That's why more research is so important, and I think there needs to be some evaluation in product standardization and reviewing the contents of the product, by which I mean that the FDA and the USDA, those kind of organizations, should be able to study and grant their seal of approval to certain products, but they shouldn't be able to completely decide to remove those items from the shelves. They can issue their warnings and say, hey, we don't endorse this product, but I don't think they should be allowed to remove it, because that takes away the public choice. Again, there's 1,000 pharmaceutical recalls every year. That means that they were put out on the market for people to purchase, and they didn't realize that there was an issue with it until after people were able to buy it. But I think if we had more, like the USDA organic labels and stuff, like an actual trusted group that you can say, hey, they approve this product, I can get it. They don't approve this one, but it's still here. But I think I like this company for such and such reason, you can still decide to get it. It's up to you. This refutation is definitely a little more nuanced than just saying that there is or there isn't too much fraud, because where's the line of too much? It's a smaller field than conventional medicine. Actually, you know what? I take that back. It's not a smaller field, because alt med encompasses anything that conventional does not. And that's a huge amount of things. There's fraud in both, so why does that make one more legitimate than the other? I think we have to look at it from that perspective and then use your own judgment. Number 4, people say that it delays surgery, or that it delays somebody's likelihood to go get surgery when they need it because they're trying a natural product. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that all medication is there to either prevent you from needing surgery or to help you recover after a surgery. I think it's kind of the goal to avoid surgery here. Surgery is usually the last resort because of how much more dangerous and risky the surgeries are than most medications. Besides that, it may very well keep people from seeing a doctor when they need to. Again, this is why education is more important in any field of medicine than almost anything else. Learning how much is too much, or how long is too long that I have this, and that at this point I should go to a doctor. The problem lies in the fact that many would rather take a pill that fixes everything immediately than to sit down and understand why they have to take that pill in the first place. Regardless, it should be their choice, but cutting off access to either side is immoral, just like the last point. Taking away their ability to say, I would like to advocate for my own health, that's the part that I disagree with personally. And that's why I like alt med, because I can actually say, hey, you know what? I think my patient actually needs to, go see a different kind of doctor because I don't specialize in this area. Conventional and traditional medicine should be a team. It should be all based on what the patient needs. And I think if we stop looking at a side or looking at it as a side and look at it as just different specialties, things will work together a lot better, and there will be a lot less shame for people who do choose the natural route. Number 5, some say that alt-med therapies are dangerous. All medicine is dangerous if the disease is serious enough. So if you've got cancer, the medication is going to match the fact that the cancer is dangerous. Cancer therapies at this point in time are pretty damaging to the person, but that's only because the disease is so aggressive that the risk-benefit ratio for medication to disease is totally different than a chronic illness that's not killing you, but it's messing with your quality of life. So whether or not medicine is dangerous, the typical claim is that because alt-med therapies don't do anything, that makes them dangerous. So for a really sick person to use them, they will die using a therapy that does nothing. One, that should be a patient's choice. That sounds awful, but if a patient feels more comfortable doing that, they should be allowed to. And two, this choice should be made after being given all the available options with research backing each choice. Oftentimes, patients are given a this or nothing option, and even some alt-med doctors don't lay out the choices in full, especially for things like cancer. For example, if a patient wants to take an antibiotic, it's the doctor's job to tell them how the medication works and what it's supposed to do, and then advise them with their opinions. This just often doesn't happen, sadly, on both sides. Some of the NDs that I've spoken with are so anti-conventional medicine that they won't even offer support options on how to recover and repair after a conventional treatment. That makes no sense. If you have a patient coming to you saying, hey, I used an antibiotic, how can I recover from that? There's a lot of weird shame around that I think needs to go bye-bye for either side to be accepted and, integrated into one another. But that's not important for right now. Because regardless, medicine is almost always dangerous because of the disease, no matter which side a person is on. The real distinction that needs to be made is in the risk-benefit ratio. Oftentimes we see non-life-threatening diseases being treated with medications that cause other diseases and lessen your quality of life. The risk of these medications seems to outweigh the reward, especially in a preventable disease. That's the key phrase here, is in preventable disease. Number 6, and the last and most common one that I hear people saying for the reason they don't like alternative medicine, and that is that it is all pseudoscience. There are some pseudoscience practices in alt-med, but there's pseudoscience in all areas of medicine due to inconsistencies with trials or even fraud. So, of course, a fairly unregulated field is going to have a few issues with pseudoscientific fraudulent actions, and we went over that before, so it kind of ties into the fraudulent area of things. But I kind of feel like pseudoscience might err more on the side of incompetence rather than intentional actions, or ignorance, not incompetence. But you can't just claim that everything within alt-med is pseudoscience, considering that the definition of alt-med is anything outside of conventional. So does that mean that nutrition is included in pseudoscience? Herbology has plenty of studies to back it up in their association with different diseases. It may be pseudoscientific to say that elderberry helps with indigestion because it probably doesn't. It's pseudoscientific to claim that because it hasn't been demonstrated to. Now, it's not pseudoscience to say that elderberry has an effect on your immune system because that's been looked into.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. We had so much fun creating this episode, and we hope you enjoy it as much as we do.
If you'd like to learn more, follow us on Instagram at studentsparks.ep, where we'll post all kinds of information and episode updates.
Don't forget to check in every other week to learn more about what it is like to be a student of neuroscience
And naturopathy.